Go ahead.
Think we can start now. So, very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session. Uh, Very important and timely webinar on the parking shift from chaos to control. As our cities continue to grow, the issue of parking has moved from being a mere inconvenience to a major urban planning challenge. Poorly managed parking not only leads to traffic congestion, increased pollution, and inefficiencies in land use, it also undermines the efforts to promote public and active transport. So today's session brings together experts and practitioners who have been in the forefront of designing, implementing these parking solutions, ranging from policy reforms to smart technologies. But before we begin with the discussion, I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you about the project under which we are organizing these mobilogs, which is Sustainable Urban Mobility, Air Quality, Climate Action, and Accessibility. So this project is with GIZ is working with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs for this project. There are political partners and German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, is the commissioning party. The main objective of this project is to enable national, state, and municipal institutions to promote climate and environment friendly, low emission, and socially balanced urban mobility systems. So, under the plan components, one of the major component is capacity development, and as part of that component, we are organizing a series of webinars, 10 webinars under the Mobilog 2. So we are also working with 5 states and 9 cities in those states on the thematic areas of training and capacity development, reducing GHG emissions and air pollution, NMT, big data, ITS, alternate fuel, road safety, safe route to school, public transport improvements, multimodal integrations, etc. So, with this, I would like to take few moments more before we start to introduce our panel members, esteemed panel members. So, today we have with us Mr. Paul Barter. Paul Barter is a globally recognized expert on parking, policy, and urban transport, known for his comparative research and reform advocacy through reinventing parking. He has advised international organizations like World Bank and GIZ and has taught urban transport policy at the National University of Singapore for over 2 decades. Welcome, sir. Next, we have with us Dr. Nitika Bhakuni. She's an associate professor at CEPT University and associate center head of the Center of Excellence in Urban Transport. With over 2 decades of experience in India and UK, her expertise lies in GIS-based transport planning, land use integration, and the accessibility analysis, contributing to several major urban mobility and planning projects across Indian cities. We have with us today Shri I. Jayakumar, an Indian Railway Traffic Service Officer of the 97 batch. He is currently serving as the member secretary of Chennai Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, KUMTA. He has extensive experience in preparing the CMP logistics plan and parking policy management for Chennai. He has also held senior roles in Indian Railways and the Ministry of Shipping and major Indian ports. Finally, I would like to introduce Ms. Shreya Gadepalli. She has been a practitioner and learner of urban mobility planning for 25 years and is regarded as one of the foremost urban mobility experts in India. She leads Urban Works and a non-profit institute that works for government and non-government stakeholders to make cities work for everyone through cutting-edge research, compelling communication, and training that sticks.
And training that sticks.
So,
So
Shreya would be moderating this session. With this, I would like to hand over to you, Shreya, and I welcome you all and looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rana, for that introduction. It's fantastic to be here and to see such a fantastic turnout that we have 91 participants, but the numbers seems to be constantly growing. Also, very happy to have the three panelists that we have today, Paul, Mr. Jaykumar, and Nikita. So what I would do is first do a quick introduction, setting the context of what the parking issue is, try to demystify the parking issue, and then we will go into a discussion with the panelists that we have. Can you see my screen? Excellent.
Yes.
So I'm calling this presentation "Park It Right" because we often park it wrong, if you will, when it comes to parking. Um, the very first question to everybody present: does your city have a parking problem? If you think it's yes, maybe you can just write in the chat box yes. Can I see yeses in the chat box? A couple of them. More, 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 and more. And the yeses are trickling in, some with full caps and exclamation marks. The answer is absolutely yes, right? Our cities have a parking problem. And some of you who've not written yes must be thinking, what kind of a dumb question is that? Of course, we have a parking problem. So let's start from the start. And the start is, what are streets for? And I'd say streets are primarily for two purposes. Of course, they have multiple other purposes, but primarily for two purposes when it comes to mobility. The first is to go around the city. You know, you want to go for work or education or recreation or to a hospital or wherever it is. Streets are meant to take you from wherever you are to wherever you need to go on a variety of modes of transportation. That might be buses or two-wheelers or cars or some other modes. But they're also meant for walking and enjoying the city. Like streets are public spaces, right? So if streets are meant for traveling across the city and as public spaces, as walking spaces, what we actually have on streets today is a parking deluge, where parking just takes over footpaths, blocks walking completely. Parking also blocks traffic. And what we are left with effectively is oftentimes just a single lane for traffic, which creates traffic bottlenecks, and it becomes a walking nightmare, right? A walking nightmare. And the interesting thing is there is no space left for even more parking. Like if you need more people to park, there's no space left for parking. So what's the solution? And the solution, if I may offer, is to grab hold of all the parking and move it off the streets, right? So that we clear up the streets of parking and reclaim the streets for people. Excellent. So that's what we need to do. And for this to happen, the solution is to create more off-street parking. But unfortunately, that's wrong. The answer is not to create more off-street parking, because this is what happens. If you go to any city, like every city has development control regulations which require buildings to create more and more parking. And yet our streets are still flooded with parking, right? So despite creating more parking in the hope of not having streets flooded with parking, we still have streets flooded with parking. And we create MLCPs, multi-level car parking, which are often just empty because streets are free to park. So which idiot is going to go pay and park in a multi-level parking when it's more convenient to just park on the street wherever you want and not pay anything for it, right? So the first starting point of doing anything with parking is to start managing parking on streets. You need to define where parking can happen, enforce that parking, and charge for that parking such that people then get nudged to move into off-street parking. Now, the next question that comes up is who's going to build that parking, right? Who should create this parking? And the answer, it seems quite logical that the government must create parking, right? This also is wrong. Because imagine if you were to buy an air conditioner, right? You were to buy an air conditioner and come out and say, government, I bought an air conditioner, but the government, you've not given me a house to fix it in. Please give me a house. Now that sounds bizarre, right? Hilarious. But that's exactly what happens when it comes to what happens when you buy a car or a two-wheeler. You say, I bought a car, but the government has not given me free place to park, right? It's exactly the same thing. We need to understand that parking is a commodity. It's a commodity that one has to pay for. It's a piece of real estate. But the point that's raised by those who have cars and two-wheelers is, I have already paid road tax. Since I have paid road tax, I should get parking, free parking. So let's look at how much road tax do people pay. Now, these are the most common cars which are sold, which come onto the Indian roads, right? A typical hatchback like a WagonR or a small sedan like a Dzire. And the lifetime road tax, which is like for all the 15 years that a vehicle can be on the road, ranges from 23,000 to 64,000, depending on the city. Mumbai charges more, good for Mumbai. Delhi charges the least. Not surprising that Delhi has more cars coming in every day. And similarly, for a sedan, it's ranging between 46,000 to 75,000 rupees, right? This is, remember, for a lifetime. How much is the cost of parking? If we understand that we cannot accommodate the amount of parking demand that there is on streets, and it needs to be off street in multi-level car structures, this is what the cost of car parking is. Like, it occupies about 250 square feet, including the circulation space, the ramps, the entry, exit, etc., which has a land cost per month. And I'm talking about monthly cost, a land cost of 7,500 rupees, a building cost of 7,500 rupees, and an operations cost about 5,800 rupees. So on the whole, for one car parking, if it needs to be built by somebody, doesn't matter if it's government or private sector, it costs about 21,000 rupees per month, right? That's the real cost of parking. There's an average cost, which I've taken in a tier 2 Indian city, not even a tier 1 city, in the CBD of a tier 1 city. I'm talking about a tier 2 city, the average cost. And if the cost of parking in a tier 2 average city is 21,000 rupees per month, and the cost that one has pays as road tax in Delhi, for example, for a WagonR or a hatchback is about 23,000. Basically, the first month's parking cost, the entire road tax only goes towards that. And then what about the next month and the next month and the next month, right? So basically, road tax is a minuscule amount that one pays compared to the cost of parking that we have in our cities. And the question really one needs to ask is, what should the government be doing? Creating houses for cars, which is parking, or housing for people, right? What is the government responsible for? And how much parking is enough parking, right? Is one MLCP of 200 cars enough, or 10 MLCPs, or 100 MLCPs, or 1,000 MLCPs? Like, we really need to start counting and saying, is this really the right way of spending public money? Especially given that road tax is not covering any of this. So next point is that we imagine that, and this is a very common idea amongst especially metros, that park and ride is required to promote public transportation. So a metro station needs to have parking to promote public transportation. Unfortunately, this is also wrong, because the real comparison, the options before us are these. For the same amount of money, which is about 15 crore rupees, you can either create one multi-level car parking of about 250 cars, or get 15 air-conditioned buses to serve about 10,000 people daily. So if our goal is to get more people to be using public transport, what we should have is a fantastic bus service that complements the metro to get more and more people to the metro. so that they can actually take the metro or even take these people directly on the bus to wherever they need to go, compared to spending all that money on an MLCP. Let's realize that parking really is like a magnet that attracts vehicles, that attracts traffic. So when you know that your destination has parking, one tends to take one's vehicle because you know that you can go park your vehicle. But imagine if there was no parking at your destination, or that parking was very expensive, then you start questioning whether or not you should get your car out and try to look at alternatives. So that's what parking is. Parking is really a magnet that attracts traffic, more private vehicles, which is essentially anti-transit oriented development. So a good transit oriented development has less parking or sometimes even no parking. The goal of parking management really, we need to understand, is not what we do presently. The present approach is to create excessive parking that is free or cheap to meet a never-ending demand, because there's constantly new demand that's coming up. Every day more vehicles are sold and each of them want to use their vehicle, which means that there is demand. At the end of every trip is a parking. That's the wrong approach. The right approach to consider is parking is a piece of real estate for which there should be charges which are raised gradually so that parking becomes a financially viable off-street business for the private sector. Because that is what it is. Parking is a piece of real estate for which one piece needs to pay rent to be able to keep one's vehicle while you're not using it. So as we saw previously, like the cost of parking is really about 21,000 rupees per month, or on an hourly basis, it's about 60 rupees, 58 rupees per hour for a piece of real estate of 250 square feet. Or when it comes to a two-wheeler, it's about 1/5 the cost, about 11 rupees when it comes to a motorcycle or a scooter. That's the actual real cost, the full market cost of parking. We did a study, my team and I at UrbanWorks did an interesting study in multiple cities, but I'm going to show you only one example of Surat. And we looked at multiple types of typologies. We looked at the new textile market, which is the old central business district of the city. That's where all the trading happens, the wholesale trading of textiles happens. The Varacha area, which is an old, dense, mixed-use area, older development, smaller units, wall-to-wall buildings, very dense, and very limited parking that's available both inside and outside the building. And third, a newly developing area across the river, which is high-end residential, with a lot of parking inside the buildings because of the DCRs, development control regulations, as well as a lot of parking on the roads because of much wider roads that have been created, a lot of which is taken over by parking. And we asked people as to their willingness to pay for parking. And these are the results. So I'll first show you the results for cars for hourly rate of parking. And this is what we found out. So this graph is a very simple graph. On the y-axis that you see here is the percentage of people who are willing to pay against the x-axis, which is the cost of parking. So what it says is, when we ask people if they would be willing to pay 10 rupees per hour for parking, nearly 100% of people, especially in the older parts of the city where the parking is limited, said, yes, we are willing to pay for parking, 10 rupees an hour. More than 90% of people said that they're willing to pay even 20 rupees per hour. It's only after that the numbers started dropping down, right? As the price increased, the willingness to pay decreased. And what we found essentially is that the willingness to pay for parking is higher in areas with limited parking. So if we want to charge more for parking, the limitation needs to be there on the other end. To a lot of people, 90% of people are willing to pay 20 rupees per hour, which actually is twice of what Surat Municipal Corporation presently charges. So funny as it is, like, people are willing to pay for it, but the municipal corporation is not charging for it. So this is a very key way of finding out what people are willing to pay, and therefore we should charge that much amount. Two, we found that nearly 50% of people, actually a little more than 50% of people, were even willing to pay 40 rupees an hour, right? So in areas which have really high demand for parking, one should be charging 40 rupees an hour, not 20 rupees an hour. But keep in mind that the real cost of parking is 58 rupees per hour. So to reach there, we need to first start at 40 and 20 to be able to eventually raise the prices to go to 60. When we looked at the cost for two-wheelers, the results were even more interesting because 80% of people, or actually a little more than 80%, sorry, this is 90% of people were willing to pay 10 rupees per hour for two-wheeler parking. And the real cost, the full market price of parking for two-wheelers is only 11 rupees. So which means that nearly everybody, especially in the older parts of the city where parking is limited, is already willing to pay the market cost for parking. So there's no reason why we should not start at these prices of charging for parking. So what should we do? We should first map and see where the demand is. And one would realize, so this is a map. This actually happens to be Rajkot, but you could do this for any city. We mapped where the demand for parking is. So the red is extremely high demand, which is like 150 to 300% of the supply. So if you have only supply for 100 vehicles of parking on the road, there in reality nearly 200 to 300 vehicles which are parked in the same space. The orange is more than the supply again, and yellow shows that there is slightly less demand than full occupancy. And then the green is where there is very little demand as of now. There is very little parking that's happening, but all in the same area. Like this entire area is 1 square kilometer. So what we need to start doing is in sections of the roads where there is highest demand, let's charge the highest rate, 40 rupees per hour. In sections where the demand is in between, which is like 60 to 100% occupancy, start charging 20 rupees an hour. And in sections which has no demand, don't charge anything at all. And what would happen because of this is that that excess demand which is there in the red and the orange areas would start redistributing. So people will find the cheaper or free areas of parking. So we need to have differential rates for parking and also demand-based parking, which means that the parking rates need to be revised. Whenever the demand exceeds 90% of the supply, we need to increase the parking fee by 50%. So even at 40 rupees, if the demand is more than 90% of the supply, the price needs to go to 60 rupees an hour. That's already reaching market price. But if the demand is less than 70% of supply, which means that it's not being occupied, there's no reason why the parking fee should not be reduced. For example, if the demand in an area where you're charging 20 rupees, the demand is still less than 70%, the 20 rupees could be brought down to 15 rupees, like essentially about 20% reduction. So start creating a technical way of charging for parking rather than a political way of deciding how much should be charged, because people are willing to pay. And if we start pricing parking according to such a formula, it would allow those who want parking to get parking, and those who do not want to pay that for that parking, look at alternatives. And that's exactly what we looked at. What would happen? Wouldn't it hit parking, the businesses, if parking was expensive? And what we realized is that most people said that they will find alternatives as the price for parking increases, right? That's what this graph shows. If the price for parking is 40%, 40 rupees, then only 34% of people overall in this particular city would pay for parking. 41% would find some other way of coming, such as an auto or a taxi. About 16% will come on bus, walk, or cycle, and only 9 to 10% will not come to that area at all. But what's interesting is that consistently, irrespective of the price, only about 10% of people said that they will not come. They said they'll find an alternative way of coming to the same place, but still come to the same area. So businesses are not going to be hurt if we raise parking prices. The last and final point I'd like to talk about is that we imagine that parking should be free of FAR when it comes to development control regulations, right? That parking should not be counted in FAR. This is also wrong, because imagine the tale of two apartments, two identical apartments, you and your neighbor in an apartment complex. Both of you get one car park each. But if your neighbor gets a second car park, you on the left side essentially are subsidizing that parking for your neighbor, because that parking, that person gets to park two cars, but you pay for that additional space that is being built for his car. So instead, if parking was charged at market rate, including the FAR, included in the FAR, then it's just a fair example, right? You choose whether you want that parking, or you choose whether you want an extra bedroom instead of that parking. So if we include parking in the FAR and increase the overall FAR, so presently, let's say the FAR is 2, we increase the FAR to 3, but let people decide whether they want parking or an extra bedroom or more living space, whatever it is, but give choice to people. That's the direction in which cities like Singapore are moving. I'll ask this of Paul to also speak about why we should go in such a direction. So let's think about, like, what we do presently is that we cap space for people. We limit how much space we can build for ourselves as human beings by putting a cap of something like 2, 1.8, etc., but encourage unlimited amount of parking space to be built. How about if we cap parking instead and allow a lot of space for people to use, right? Think about it. Do you want more space for yourself or your car? Let's create parks, not parking. And I hope my presentation today helped demystify parking. So I hope this presentation kind of opened your eyes on what the issue of parking is and how we should approach parking. And with that, I'd like to now go to the panelists. First, I'll start with Paul. Paul, maybe you could give your introductory remarks on what you think about parking, but also speak now as well as later about how cities worldwide are grappling with the issue of parking and how some of them have managed to crack the parking problem. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Shreya. Yeah, so I prepared a few remarks, but I'll use them as a rough guide, and then I'll try to respond to Shreya's questions as well, hopefully within just a few minutes. So here's my main message. Managing street parking may not be glamorous or really exciting, not many ribbons to cut, but cities can't solve their parking problems without it. So let me explain that in a little more detail, and I'll try to give some examples as well. So as Shreya said, some people think cities should simply create more parking, but there are big problems with that. Shreya already mentioned some of them. Building more parking doesn't help much if the street parking is not managed. And as Shreya mentioned, Indian cities have been finding this out. Multi-level parking facilities are often half empty because it's just too easy to park in the streets. The streets are still in chaos. And another reason is that we actually risk ending up with too much parking. Australian and American cities tried to build more and more parking for decades. They still had parking problems in the street, and eventually they ended up with oceans of parking. Many of you may have visited and seen so much parking everywhere, and they have car-dependent transport systems. The cure to the parking problem was worse than the disease in those cases. So these days, most parking experts say that the best way, or even the only way, to solve street parking problems is to manage the street parking. Now, what does that mean? It means good street design. As Shreya said, the purpose of the streets is central. So that sometimes includes banning parking from the streets where parking doesn't fit. But where parking does fit, in many streets, minor streets perhaps, where traffic is not very important, we need to use parking fees and enforcement if we have a parking problem. Now, here's another surprising thing. Managing parking in the streets doesn't just help the streets. It also helps solve the off-street parking problems. So we've already heard that parking is expensive to build. And in India, a common off-street parking problem is that parking is a terrible investment. The willingness to pay for parking is too low, and nobody can make any money from building parking. Motorists don't have enough incentive to find off-street parking or to pay for it. So we have this strange situation. Parking off-street is half empty, it's losing money, and yet everybody says there's a parking shortage. That's weird. It turns out that on-street parking fees and effective enforcement, by providing motorists with the incentive to look for parking off-street and to pay for it, will make parking a better investment. So even if you're a little skeptical of what Shreya said before and what I'm saying now, that providing more and more parking is not really the solution, even if you think your city needs more parking, and certainly certain districts probably do need more parking, even then, the first thing to focus on is actually on-street parking management with fees and enforcement, because then you'll get about the right amount of off-street parking eventually. Shreya mentioned that parking fees can be set in a demand responsive way. It turns out that that is an increasingly common thing done in cities around the world. Cities as diverse as Moscow in Russia, Seattle in the United States, Auckland in New Zealand, Calgary in Canada, Taipei in Taiwan, China, are doing it that way, roughly speaking. So it's not a new thing to be setting your parking fees. If the parking's too full, you should raise the fees. If it's too empty, you drop the fees. And if it's just right, you leave the fees as they are. And this is a reminder of another important point about fees, is that many of us think that the purpose of on-street parking fees is revenue. The purpose of off-street parking fees is to pay for the parking. The purpose of on-street parking fees is not to pay for the parking, and it's not revenue for the city. The purpose of on-street parking fees is to make sure that the parking is never quite full. So this is really important. Why is that important? Well, it's important because we want motorists who arrive in the area to be able to find parking, to find an empty space. And that means they'll park quickly in a proper space, and they won't circle around, they won't double park, they won't park on the footpaths, they won't park at a corner. So we can achieve this. How is it that fees achieve this? They nudge people, as Shreya said, people are responsive to the fees, they'll choose an alternative, or they'll park in one of those green areas where the parking demand is low and walk a little bit. So just to end up, some of you might be thinking, but isn't it very difficult to do this? Isn't it difficult to set up efficient street parking fees and street parking enforcement? And the answer is yes, it used to be very, very difficult. But the good news is that technology over the last 10 years or so has been making it easier and easier to impose parking fees in the streets and to achieve effective enforcement. Improvements such as mobile payments using apps, QR codes, or RFID, digital enforcement tools such as identifying vehicles with license plate recognition and RFID again. And these modern methods also provide the city with a rich stream of parking data to allow the city to monitor the situation and to make adjustments when needed. So just in summary, managing street parking is not glamorous, but there's no better way to solve your parking problems, both in the streets and away from them. So perhaps in the interest of time, I'll stop there. If there's time later and we have some more discussion, I'll mention a few specific cities doing specific interesting things. Many people are interested in Japan, and perhaps I'll mention Japan later on. They have an interesting policy, proof of parking, which I believe there is interest in that in India. So if there's time later, I'll say a few words about that. But just to give everyone a chance to speak, I'd better stop there. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Paul. With that, I'll actually move to Mr. Jay Kumar. He is the member secretary of one of the first and so far the most concrete UMTAs that we've had in the country, the Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority. We've been talking about the need for UMTA forever in India, but Chennai was one of the first to establish such an UMTA back in 2010 and now has a proper secretariat, which is headed by Mr. Jayakumar. Good to have you with us. And also good to have somebody who's a decision maker in his own right, and also somebody who's recently published Chennai's first parking policy. So, Mr. Jayakumar, maybe you could speak a little bit about the process that you went about, the key issues that you have addressed in the parking policy, but also the challenges that you see and how you plan to overcome them. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Shreya. Now, UMTA, as a UMTA in Indian context, this is the first UMTA with a legal backing and a separate secretariat, because many cities have offices on additional charges, and so it is working under the development authorities as a party. UMTA in Chennai also like that. Then for the past 3 years, it is in active mode now. Recently, the parking policy has been approved by the Honorable Chief Minister himself, and it has been issued. Government order also has been issued. So few reflections, and just if you permit, I'm having some presentation. I can quickly give the presentation, or I can explain.
It might be easier if you were to just speak about it, reflections on it, rather than a presentation, because I think people really want to know from the horse's mouth how it is to be leading the parking policy, and the challenges that you see and how you're going to overcome the challenges.
Yeah. In Chennai, the parking policy has been talked about for the past 5 to 6 years. Then we have taken this responsibility once now we have been activated, and we drafted the parking policy, run through all the departments, local body, police, all the concerned ministries also. Lot of discussions happened. Now, main thing is, many of the points you have explained, parking is a real estate commodity, not free. That point we we're driven. And mainly here in Tamil Nadu or in India, if you, because parking is a responsibility of the urban local body, because all roads are owned by the local body on paper. So the responsibility as per the Urban Local Body Act, the parking fee collection is resting on them. Everybody thinks that parking is fee is a non-tax revenue source for the local body. So they are looking at parking as a revenue source. But what UMTA, we are projecting it as a travel demand measure, or it's an urban mobility measure primarily, and the revenue is incidental. It's a byproduct.
That's right.
It's not necessarily the primary item. That's what we are driving the force. We explained to the Chief Secretary level meeting also. Everybody, in principle, they agreed also, yes, parking is one of the factor we can nudge the people to go towards the public transport. That's what we flagged it, and so it started like that. So the main features in our policy is, one is differential pricing. Now, you said differential pricing we suggested based on day, night, locality, and busy area, non-busy area. In fact, we have given a formula also. But in the higher level now, it has been discussed. Immediately, no, we should not do this. At least we will fix the price higher, and that is moderately, and then slowly we can increase it over the period of time. That is, we can use it as a nudging tool to push the people towards public transport. So we have the pricing wise, we have some small setback. Otherwise, we have given a 4 bucket list. One is the parking policy dwells on the planning process. That is like a CMDA, Development Authority. In the building rules, they have to build the rules of parking management, and we told the parking supply. Second one is bigger establishment like commercial establishments, or office complexes. So we have introduced more than 10,000 square meter built up area. Then the development authorities has to insist on traffic impact assessment also. So that any larger development, they should follow the traffic impact assessment guidelines, and this should be one of the factor before the approval process. That is also we have mentioned. In fact, we are working on TIA guidelines for Chennai now. So it will be ready by December. So this is the planning process. Other three pillars are planning and design, pricing and enforcement, and reinvestment. So here, one of the key factor is generally policy talks about only policy. Here, what we brought strategy and action plan also. That is, we have recommended an institutional structure for parking management. Many of you may be knowing normally parking management at the local level, now it has been happening in a street-wise, and local, some vendors will do. Partly it will be accounted, partly will not be non-accounted, less technology intervention, and so forth. So we wanted single authority or single agency to manage parking as well as enforcement. Here in Indian context, the parking is managed by the local body. Enforcement, that is no parking or towing the vehicle, is being managed by the police. So again, naturally, police having a lot of vacancies, 25 to 30%. So they will not come immediately to any towing process or any footpath, any vehicle is there, they may not be interested in taking it away. So this is a inherent problem. So we thought we will bring into one authority. Then there is a issue of Motor Vehicle Act. Motor Vehicle Act and the Motor Vehicle rules in India says the towing is to be authorized by the men in uniform. So again, everybody talks about how to amend the act and all. Now we said act amendment is not required. The rule says men in uniform has to authorize. So the men in uniform will be deployed in a single authority like Kumta. We will make a parking management unit. He will be sitting here in Kumta. One man can authorize towing for the entire city through app. So that has been agreed upon, and we have given an institutional structure where we have a parking management unit in Kumta, and we will do the parking plan area level, cluster level, not only street level, cluster level parking plan, design, implement, enforce, all in one roof. Suppose if any local body wanted to implement, suppose Greater Chennai Corporation or any other corporation wanted to implement on their own also, they are welcome. But the planning and design will be given by Kumta. They will do parking fee collection and enforcement. Monitoring will be done by Kumta, executive. This is what structure we have given. So it has been passed, and as a pilot project in Chennai, Anna Nagar, 4 square kilometer area, 25 kilometer road network, we have done a detailed plan, and the tender also document is getting ready, and it is in the finance vetting. Shortly we will be floating a tender. So this parking will be launched by maybe by September. That's what we are thinking, because the tender process will take 2 months, and the vendor has to prepare himself for another 1 more month. So another 3.5 months, and vendor will be there on a PPP model, parking management with the enforcement capability. Excellent. And the one thing is we are already under developing a unified software for the parking for the entire city. So whoever the vendor comes, they have to hook into our software. This software is mobile based, and the parking, how we are doing it, so anybody can download the app and book it after reaching the site, or at the site we will be having a QR code. They can scan and do the web booking, or parking marshals will be there, they can also book. So the detailed things are there, so I don't want to take much time. Then further I would like to take questions also. This is a way forward we are thinking.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. I'm very hopeful that Chennai would pave the way. And incidentally, I was involved in the initial stages of setting up of the Kumta and have been involved over the period of time with various agencies in Tamil Nadu. Very promising. Now, you spoke about the need for area level management plans, and that brings me to Nitika, who is a professor at CEPT University. And she has worked with GIZ, the organizers of this webinar, in developing an area level parking management plan, a toolkit for it. So, Nitika, over to you for a quick presentation. Thereafter, we could then go into additional questions and questions from the audience as well. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. Just to let everyone know, this toolkit we had prepared as a part of GIZ research funding, which was on parking area management plan for Bhubaneswar. And what we wanted was prepared their CMP. They also had their development plan and they had a parking policy. Now, in all these plans, they were talking about parking area management plan, and they wanted a way forward in terms of an actionable plan of how to implement these parking area management plan on ground, how to plan for them, and how can this be, demonstrated to the authorities and also as a learning guide. So parking area management plans are basically local area plans to manage parking demand and discourage, the idea is to discourage ownership of car and promote sustainable modes of transport. So these are not standalone plan in itself, but it's a bundle of plans that we will be talking about as a part of the toolkit. So one part of it is how do we make our parking area management plan, and the other part is the implementation strategy for these plans was also talked about as a part of this toolkit. So this is a toolkit that is available online. The link is shared in the last slide, where we talked about how do we start planning for it, how do we delineate an area, what are the data resources that are required, the analysis that one needs to do for the parking demand and supply assessments, and then formulation of the parking area management plan. What priorities to be given, the number of areas for parking and no parking, pedestrians and NMT, improvements, trade signages, contract management, enforcement, and monitoring and evaluation. So all these aspects as a step-by-step guide has been provided in this toolkit. So basically, when to think about PAN is when there are competing land uses, roads become unsafe. I think a lot of these problems have been talked about by Shreya in her presentation as well, or as such. And this is one way of delineating, where we illustrated how you can use or the administrative boundary, the physical barriers, and the activity zones, the transit. Looking at the land uses which are transit supportive and non-supportive, and the kind of congestion that they are causing, and then accordingly delineate areas. So, for example, in this slide, the green boundary was delineated, which is around 1.5 square kilometers. So, when we looked at parking area management plans across the world, they were ranging from 1 to 3 square kilometers. So, so we illustrated how authorities could do that. Then the kind of data to be collected and what to do with that data: supply side data, demand side data, management data, institutional data, NMT data. Because when we talk about parking, we forget about these aspects, but these are very, very important aspects. And of course, the enforcement part of it. We also talked about what are the typical issues that come out of any data analysis in terms of provisioning of infrastructure, parking in infrastructure supply, enforcements, institutional issues, NMT facility issues, parking demand issues, parking management, and basically prioritizing certain modes or providing pick-up drop facilities for IPTs in some of these transit areas, which may need to be looked into a little carefully. We also talked about two kinds of zones. Type of zones were the transit zones, where we had high frequency public transport applying on those networks, and the kind of approach to parking area management plan could be a little different in these areas, where one would restrict and limit the kind of parking, as Shreya has also talked about. Where you have transit, you don't need to provide any kind of parking as such. And more focus has to be on NMT and walkability and integration of modes. in these areas, and the parking, short-term parking that is also provided, if it needs to be provided, needs to be high, charged at a higher rate, and very restricted kind of parking needs to be provided in these areas, if at all. In the non-transit area, these are areas with low public transport frequencies. Here, the focus would be on the shared parking options in terms of how do you manage parking demand in these areas. Again, shifting of short-term parking along the PT modes, looking at NMT improvements. Those will be standard across, and also looking at permit schemes in some of these areas, because public transport is not there. But in the longer run, we would also want to prioritize public transport on in these areas as well. And how does one work towards public transport improvement strategies for the city as a whole? So this is how the parking area management plan would look like in terms of the signages, the kind of dynamic pairs that would have limited parking zones along the corridors, freight parking, dedicated bays for pickup and dropping off of goods. So those kind of things. And as I said, parking area management plan is not a single plan. So you have area permit plans, you have open area and NMT circulation plans, wayfinding, vending zone plans, traffic circulation plans, and the toolkit provides a guidance on how to go about doing each of these plans and what are the steps involved. And I think I don't need to repeat these kind of strategies in terms of no free parking in any of these parking area management plans, avoid lump sum payments, how Shreya also talked about optimizing charging of parking. So all those kind of strategies have been discussed as well. And how do you manage the financing of these plans is through the municipal budgets. There is also a councillor budget with the wards, councillors. Then there is one could get into PPP arrangements, and of course UTF funds can also be siphoned towards improving infrastructure, not really providing for more parking, but managing these areas towards improvement of PT and NMT and shared modes is where the focus needs to be. In terms of responsibility, I think planning cells, implementing agencies, enforcement agencies, and monitoring agencies need to have clear, defined roles and responsibilities. And in case of Bhubaneswar, for example, we also talked about setting up a parking cell, and this parking cell would be facilitated by the Bhubaneswar Smart City program. Or the company that is there, and it have ITS, technology to improve this thing, and key performance indicators to assess performance of the contractors who are again let out for or tendered out in terms of collecting these parking charges. How do you assess their performance? And this performance evaluation then becomes a criteria to increase charges or decrease charges, and to see the overall efficiency of the parking itself. So this is the toolkit, and the link is here. And we've also given 2 area demonstration plans for KIT University area and the Master Canteen area in Bhubaneswar, and use this toolkit to demonstrate how it can be done with detailed plans and programs and the design interventions that are there. So that's about from me, Shreya. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Nitika, for that presentation. I think it looks like a fantastic toolkit, and I would certainly recommend everybody to download and check it out. And I'm also dropping the link of a very interesting game that Paul and I developed. It's called the Parking Game. You can see it in the chat box. Anybody who's there in the session, please open the link and check it out for yourself. This is an open source parking game now. You can download the components and run the game yourself. But I found this game to be extremely effective in communicating the conundrum around parking, as well as how parking, like what the solutions are. Like, it really opens up minds like a light bulb, right? Suddenly they see how whatever I've said in this presentation or whatever Paul has said actually opens up in the minds in a very experienced way, like because people actually play the parking game. They try to park in a congested area with and without pricing, with and without enforcement, and so on and so forth. So do check it out. It's called the parking game. Also, study, like I had shown you some of the data from a study in Surat. So this was actually a multi-city study and also looked at international case studies. So do check out that study as well. It will give you more effective information, whatever you would need, again, on the UrbanWorks website. With that, I'd like to move on to some questions that have been posted here in the chat box. One of the questions was, the idea of proof of parking. So I'd like to ask Paul, as in some cities have the proof of parking requirements, others don't. What do you think is the effectiveness of proof of parking eventually in solving the parking problem? You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I understand there's quite a lot of interest in proof of parking in India, and but also some skepticism. But the most important thing to understand about proof of parking in Japan, as it works in Japan, and Japan is the main place it's worked. It's worked for 70 years there, and it's worked very well. And the key thing is proof of parking has a twin policy. So there's two different policies that complement each other. So in Japan, if you park a car overnight in the streets, it will be towed away. And this is the explanation of why you might wonder, why does the proof of parking law not promote corruption? You know, you could bribe a police officer to get your proof of parking certificate and then buy a car. Well, the answer is there's no point getting a fake certificate or a bribed certificate, because you still can't park in the street. Your car will be towed away. So if any Indian jurisdiction wants to do this effectively and have it make a difference, you would need to establish some mechanism by, you probably can't apply it retrospectively, right? People already have cars and they're parking them in the streets. You can't suddenly tell them you need proof of parking, we're going to tow your car. But what you could perhaps do is say that if you buy a new car or a used car, so a car gets transferred, or maybe if you move house, then we could apply the proof of parking law to you, and you would have to prove that you can you have parking in your new place or for your new car. And then we would need the enforcement officials to be able to tell the difference between the cars to which proof of parking applies and the ones to which it doesn't apply. And the ones it does apply to, we can tow them away if we find them at 3 a.m. It might sound a bit harsh, but this would be reasonable because people would know this in advance before they make that decision of buying a car or moving house. So maybe that's enough on that. But the key thing is two twin policies, not just the one. You're muted this time.
Yes. Which brings us back to the primary point that there is no alternative to managing parking on the streets. And management means defining where you can park or cannot park, and enforcing this parking, and oftentimes charging for parking, right? So these three steps are essential for any kind of further reform on parking, whether it's proof of parking or anything else that we want to put. Because without this, everything else fails, right? So the starting point really is start managing parking on streets, define, charge, and enforce. So that's part one. Another question that came up, and this is from Advait Jani: can on-street parking management work without first designing streets? Again, maybe this is a question which any one of the panelists can answer, or I'm happy to take the question too. But would you, Nitika or Mr. Jayakumar, want to take this question?
Actually, on-street parking should go along with the street design.
Exactly.
So that is the way we have to go, because now we have done a detailed area level parking management plan. So where there is a no parking, a bus stop area or junction area, school zone, and IPT drop area, bus base. So all we have to define it. Then only the balance area only parking.
Exactly.
So that's what we have given in our policy. Second one, I am coming back to the proof of parking. In fact, in Chennai policy, we have included the proof of parking also. But when the caveat is, as a long-term measure, we have to go towards proof of parking. There also immediately there were a lot of newspapers carrying message: if you do not have a parking space, you cannot buy a car. So there is a lot of questions, political level and all raised, and we told not now. There is once a situation matures, that means we have to supply adequate public transport system. Then only we can go towards that. That's what we explained. So it's a long term, but anyhow, it is finding a place in our parking policy. Second one, now already people know aspiring society, Asian or Indian society. So everybody is buying a car, and now in the policy we have included travel demand under travel demand measures, roads width of 9 meter and above only. That is now we are planning in a phase 2, not now. In Anna Nagar itself, phase 1 only pure parking. Phase 2 will be residential permits where 9 meter roads are there. So we can define some parking spaces for the residential area. They can park it there, provided they have to pay on a monthly basis or quarterly basis. Suppose, for example, there are 20 cars are there in the street, but the allocation is only 10 slots, only 10. Another 10, they have to take the car away somewhere. That is the idea. Multi-level car parking or some other private place they have to take. But that takes time. Now, now the habit is now, Mr. Paul also mentioned that in the Western countries, everybody will be 90% law abiding. They will go and book the parking ticket and go. Here, 90% will try to avoid. So we have to focus more on enforcement initially. Over the years, we have to go towards the maturation stage. That is why, in our parking in Anna Nagar also, we are focusing more on enforcement aspect also. So this is what the way forward we are planning.
Sure. Excellent. Just a point about the proof of parking. I'd also like to highlight the fact that parking is not just a one location issue. Every vehicle requires at least 2, if not more, parking slots. There's one at the residence, one at the destination, and sometimes it's more than one destination. It might be an office, but it also might be a mall or a recreation center or a hospital or wherever else it is that you're going. And therefore, even while proof of parking might work at the residence end of it, it doesn't necessarily work at the other end, which means you still need to manage parking on the streets. And the eventual goal must be to make parking an off-street real estate rental, and for which you need to start managing on-street parking. So that's where the buck really stops. There's also a question, this one's for you, Mr. Jaykumar, on the enforcement plan. How do you see, you've highlighted already that enforcement is key for any of this to work. How do you see the enforcement really rolling out? What kind of policy measures you're taking for enforcement to be effective, and what kind of maybe IT systems or other ways in which you will make enforcement effective? Because I think that's where that's the weak point.
Yeah. See, parking ticket, what we are planning, camera-based system. So our internal team also developed a deep learning algorithm. So we are numbering the parking slots, A2, A1, A2, A3, for example. Suppose A2 location is free, you are parking your vehicle. First 10 minutes, it's free. 11th minute onwards, if the parking ticket is not issued in the system, the camera is lat long coded and it will alert the server. The server will give a message to the parking marshal at ground. He will go to the car and scan the vehicle number. So vehicle number through the Vahan portal also we are planning to have a tie-up. So the owner, the message will go, you have to take a parking ticket. If he is not taking, even after 3 hours, it will be locked. After 6 hours, it will be towed. That is a method we are planning. And in the PPP vendor, we are specifying very clearly how many tow vehicles to be there, how many towing staff should be there. So our single software system also that having a enforcement portion. So it will be authorized by the police, but the tow vehicle will go to the site and tow if they are not paying after 6 hours also. And now we are having an SOP also now prepared. It will be signed by the police, local body corporation, and Kumta also, that in the event of how to manage the enforcement and management, what are all the responsibilities of all the agencies. For example, somebody is parking on the car on the street, he is objecting, a law and order situation comes. Then the parking marshal has to give local control. If the vendor is having one control there, local control. That control will give the message to our control, that is Kumtas or any central control. Their police personnel will be there. He will talk to the police control. Police control, he will deploy the additional backup. So this is what enforcement we are planning for the information flow and action flow. So that's what we are looking at it. But initially, it will be very tough. It is not a bed of roses. It will be very tough. There will be a lot of ground level issues will be there. So this is a maiden effort. Based on the success story, we have to expand to other areas.
Thanks. Maybe Paul, you could speak about some international examples of how technology has helped cities to manage or enforce parking effectively.
Yes. So, I mean, one key advance, which I believe India is progressing on, but maybe not quite ready, is that enforcement can become much more efficient once the vehicle registration system is improved, such that, as Mr. Jayakumar mentioned, you can just identify the vehicle, and then you can just send a notification, please pay the fine, or alternatively dispute your fine if you believe it's a mistake. No need towing and clamping in places where there's an efficient and effective vehicle registration registry. Towing should be the last resort. In places where there's an efficient registration system, you only tow if someone is parked in a dangerous way, obstructing, say, a bus lane, or making it dangerous for bicycles, etc. You don't really tow people for simple payment violations or anything like that. You would just issue them with a fine. So that would be something to work towards. One problem in India is that you only pay the one registration fee. In most countries, the vehicle registration system is updated every year because people pay their registration every year. And so the authorities update the registration regularly. And if you move house, you have to update it within 14 days and whatnot. So the vehicle registration is up to date. In India, we have our doubts about that, maybe.
That's right. And also the question of, in India, only sort of non-commercial vehicles get a lifetime road tax, like, a one-time road tax. Commercial vehicles, on the other hand, do actually have annual renewals that are required. So maybe it's time that even personal motor vehicles go into the regime of annual re-registration. Like when we pay for everything on a monthly or an yearly basis, why not also for vehicle registration to help improve the registry itself, right? Nitika, anything
Yes,
that you'd like to add? Yeah, sorry.
Just
please.
one thing, Shreya, I just wanted to add. I agree to what Paul is saying, that, the registration is an issue, but I think the challenge that enforcement agencies now are also facing that in India, even with the, new smart city program, and a lot of challans are now issued as e-challans in India. The payment of those challans is recovery of that cost with the traffic police is still a question in terms of how many people actually pay those challans as such. So we have more violations on that side as well. So maybe if not towing, then clamping is something that will still need to be done in Indian cases where you would want people to pay for violating the law, because we are notorious as far as paying for things is concerned, even though we have
It's
systems where challans
yeah.
come to our house and
Yeah,
one can
it's
see
not
that,
just
you know,
Indians.
Yes.
Anywhere,
Yeah,
anywhere in the
actually,
world will do it if they can get away with it. Yeah. So, one thing is,
in India,
towing can be used if someone
Yeah.
has 5 outstanding tickets. Then you can
Yeah.
tow them. That's a good idea. Yeah.
yes.
Yes, Mr.
Actually, in
Jayakumar,
India,
please go ahead.
in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, the same thing. So like challans issued, only 10% is the realization. There is a 900 crores worth of challan issued over Tamil Nadu. Only 60 to 70 crores realization. So 10%. And here also in Anna Nagar, what we are planning, okay, it is like a deterrent. It's a last measure only. We will be towing the vehicle. Normally, people we are expecting that people will pay. And towing also, you cannot tow all the vehicle also. Again, practically not possible to manage. So we are planning to have one impounding area for keeping the towing vehicle, some 20 vehicle space. We are already earmarked, and the vehicle will be placed there. This is like a last minute deterrent. But the only thing is we have to see how far the enforcement effectiveness at ground level. Second, bikes will be parked on the footpath, so we have to lift it up. So there are challenges will be there. So we will see by the next 3 months when we launch this program, we will come to know.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
We are
I-
almost
Like
at the
you
end
said,
of the session. So
yeah.
what I'd like is to ask each of our panelists to sort of have a closing remark, like one final word on what you would like to highlight before we leave. Right. So maybe starting with you, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that I've learned, especially from both of the other speakers today, as well as in several similar webinars recently from India, is I'm just very, very encouraged by the huge amount of activity going on parking reform, parking management in Indian cities. And so it's very, very encouraging. And I would like to urge everyone to feel to have a can-do attitude. I'm very, very encouraged by Bhuvaneshwar's and Kumta's can-do attitude on this, because for so many years we've seen that it's just too hard. We can't do this. We can't do that. And I see that things are changing in India, and this is really encouraging. And I would encourage you to look around the world. I have a website called the Parking Reform Atlas, and in that website you can see many examples of places that have also adopted a can-do attitude. It really is possible to make improvements. Of course, it doesn't always go perfectly, as both of you have realistically observed. There's a learning process, but steady improvement. 3 steps forward, maybe 1 step back. And I really believe that when we come back and do this same webinar in 10 years' time, we'll see a dramatic improvement, and scores of cities in India will have success stories without too much further ado.
That's fantastic to hear, Paul. Maybe what you could do is to also put the link to the Parking Reform Network Atlas in the chat box for people to access. Nitika.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, free parking is a crime. If you can buy a car, or a motor vehicle, you can obviously pay for it. What government needs to do is invest in giving options to people, providing good PT systems, good walking environments, and one hopes that one day one will bring this, issue of parking under control. That's all from my side. But the focus has to be not in provisioning, but in managing this demand and moving people to sustainable goals.
Excellent. Last words from you, Mr. Jayakumar.
One point I left it, multi-level car parking.
Yeah.
In Chennai experience, we have a multi-level car parking in one place. So people have to walk back to the shops around 700, 800 meters. People are not going. So multi-level car parkings are relatively empty. Utilization will be 30 to 40%. So in our policy, we address this issue. We have mentioned that any multi-level car parking, the pricing should be lesser than the pricing on the road. Road should be higher.
Yeah.
And standalone multi-level car parking, not simply we should not give it to the vendor.
Yeah.
In and around the multi-level car parking, 500-meter radius of on-road parking also should be bundled together with the MLCP. So
Okay.
that he will be managing the 500-meter radius of multi-level car parking area,
Yeah.
and as well as multi-level car parking. That bundling also we have recommended in the policy. With that, now Greater Chennai Corporation also now planning for a tender for 2-3 locations. Yeah, there is multi-level car parking plus on road also. Pricing, differential pricing. Multi-level will be less, on road will be higher. That's all.
Yeah.
And again, now rightly said, Nitika also, that parking is not free. But even now, many of the at the higher management level feel that as a welfare state, we have to create more parking. Like a welfare. But that realization, sensitization, now it has to happen. Now only started. Now we are every forum. We are also reiterating that parking is not free. It has to be charged, and coupled with we have to pump more buses and more public transportation.
Transport.
Transportation. That is what we are focusing. So let us see. We will. I think some good learning inputs also from your side, the toolkit, and we will see this atlas also. Our team also will work towards that, so that we will refine based on our experience. So we are now. So initially, KUMTA was thought about only a planning and coordinating body. We thought, no, planning and coordination, okay, but we should show them that okay, we can also act in the field, show the results, so that local bodies will replicate this model. That is the idea. Now we are going for it. Yeah.
Excellent. And before closing, maybe final word from me. I cannot emphasize enough the need to start managing parking on the roads, which means that we also need to design those streets, but we need to start defining, charging, and enforcing parking on the roads. This opens up the possibility of off-street parking markets. We've already seen in multiple cities that this is already happening. So, for example, in Chennai, I know that in and around multiple metro stations, there are people who are giving their own private plots for two-wheeler parking for people to access. So the whole park and ride idea, while on the whole, I think it's completely nonsensical for the government to invest in parking. But having said that, the fact that presently we do not have good feeder services and two-wheelers often are used to access public transportation, especially for longer distance trips, private parking lots are already opening up because there is a market for it. But that would be promoted that much more if we start managing parking on the streets. So there is a huge potential for private off-street parking market. What the government needs to do is, rather than building parking, to start charging and enforcing parking on the street, to let the private sector take over the business of parking. So with that, this session comes to an end. Over to you, Rana, for any closing words that come from you. And
thank you, Shreya. Thank you for a wonderful moderation, and heartfelt thank you to all the speakers for sharing such valuable insights and recommendations. And to all the participants who stayed with us till the end of it. We have exceeded our time, but thank you so much. And I would like to just mention that with today's session, we have completed our target of organizing 10 webinars under Mobilog 2.0, but with the incredible response we have received, we will be organizing 5 more webinars over the next year. And the next one would be on building integrated transport systems, the learnings from transport from London and others. So please join us on 22nd May again at the same time. We'll be happy to share the insights with you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being a part of the Mobilog 2.0 community. Thank you.
bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.